But I'm pleased to welcome this afternoon Kristen Sikorsky, who is a 2020 master's alum and studied in the Horticultural and Natural Resources Department at K-State. She was in late 2020 selected for the 2021 class of the Presidential Management Fellows Program, which is a very prestigious and selective program. She was part of the 8% of those selected as finalists from the applicant pool for her year, and the first Presidential Management Fellow for K-State. So really excited for her for that selection, and pleased that she is joining us to share with us today her experience so far, and just to provide some guidance and in sharing with others, encouraging them to consider this opportunity and maybe share some tips on how to be hopefully be successful, make yourself a little more competitive for this fellowship opportunity. Also wanted to give her a little shout out. As you can see in the back of her screen there, she was also in 2020 selected as our People's Choice winner for our 3-minute thesis competition. So I'd like to think that prepared her well and for this fellowship and for her professional career in being effective at communicating the work that she does, and how she can relate that to a broader non-specialized audience. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kristen and hear what she has to share with us today.
Great. Thank you so much for that nice introduction, Megan. And yeah, definitely it prepared me very, very well. So today we're going to talk about just the Presidential Management Fellowship as a whole, the pathway to it, how do you apply for it, who's eligible. But Presidential Management Fellowship is a mouthful, so you're going to hear me refer to it as the PMF program or the PMF today. So the opportunity is an annual cycle. This year, the class of 2023 will be applying from September 13th through the 27th, and that opens and closes at noon Eastern time. So just dates to keep in mind as we go through the presentation here. And just some background on me. So I was a 2020 K-State grad from the Park Management and Conservation program, graduated with my master's in Horticulture and Natural Resources. I applied the same year that I graduated, so in 2020, and I was selected as a 2021 PMF. I was the first ever from Kansas State and the first ever in the Parks Rec Tourism major that the Office of Personnel Management classifies some applicants as. So I'm now employed with the Forest Service. So I've got a federal position with the USDA. I'm in the second year of my fellowship, so I'm just wrapping things up. I will conclude this upcoming March and be non-competitively converted to a full-time, fully benefited government employee. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a bit. My position title is a unique one for a lot of PMFs. I'm what's known as a recreation staff officer, and I work on the Safford Ranger District of the Coronado National Forest. And if you're not familiar with how the Forest Service is broken up, we have different offices all across the country. Ranger districts are the boots on the ground folks. So we're the ones who go out in the field and we manage the forests directly on the ground. Our oversight is what controls a lot of the rules and recreation opportunities that happen right here on the forests across the country. So I'm not usually in the office all week. I usually have 2 or 3 days in the field, and we'll touch upon that when I talk about my experience in a little while. But it's quite a unique position. It's been really wonderful as a learning experience. I'm also a federal interagency drone pilot. So if you read about my background, you'll see that my thesis was largely based on the usage of drones for recreational impact monitoring. I was able to continue using that pilot's license into my federal career too. So the program at K-State really prepared me well for a career in the federal government. And now, because of my experience with the program, I'm also a PMF ambassador, and that is not through the Forest Service. That's through the Office of Personnel Management, who administers this program. So we'll start off with what the program actually is. And to put it simply, it's a recruiting tool for the federal government to find new leaders to develop. When you're accepted to this program, it is for advanced degree holders across all academic disciplines. You are eligible to be employed with any federal agency across the country, and some even internationally. It is a 2-year fellowship. You are a full-time federal employee during that 2 years. You have a competitive salary and benefits. And at the end, you're offered a non-competitive conversion to a permanent position in the federal government. So that's what makes the program so competitive. Everybody wants that non-competitive conversion and all of the other goodies that come along the way. So just some websites to keep in your back pocket. PMF.gov is a really good place to find resources that discuss the program, discuss the application cycle, and it also can link you up with PMF ambassadors through OPM. So if you have questions about a specific agency, there's a great list of folks there who are willing to answer your questions. We've also got PMF subscriber lists, which will mail you directly when any large dates or deadlines are coming up. And then PMF program through OPM has an email address that you can reach out to as well. So the entire point of the program is just to attract people who are interested in federal service, who are interested in public service, or who are interested in the leadership capacity of this program. So how does it actually work? Like I said, it's a pipeline for future leaders, and that's really what the program is designed around. The application process tends to be extremely competitive. A high number of applicants apply every year, and you are sent sort of through an application pipeline along the way. So you'll apply for the program. When you take the assessment that's associated with the program, if you pass that assessment, you'll be selected as a semifinalist. And then you will go through a short interview process. That's a new addition for this year. So I didn't have to do that when I applied, but we'll touch base on that and discuss what that entails. If you're selected as a finalist, then you have the ability to apply for all of the jobs that are open specifically for PMFs. If you get hired, then you are now considered a fellow and you are officially working for the federal government at that point. So when you go through that process, you'll wind up with a 2-year fellowship if you're selected as a fellow. You'll have a full-time salary and benefits, training and development options, and the potential, of course, to be non-competitively converted at the end. And like I said, these tend to be leadership positions, so you're not entering at the usual GS 5 or 7 that most graduate students will enter as. You'll initially be appointed usually at the GS 9 level if you haven't had any sort of federal government experience beforehand that would make you eligible for a higher position. But you do have promotion potential to the GS 13 even over the course of the program. So during that 2 years, you are eligible for promotion just like any other federal employee. There are a few components that go into the fellowship that make it really unique. So the big one is the rigorous leadership development program and your IDP plan, your individual development plan. And this is an agreement between you and your supervisor. It sort of discusses your interests, your goals with the program, and you get to sort of outline the training that you want to take over the course of your 2 years. Part of the program is a required 160 hours of formal interactive training, and this can't be anything to do with your day-to-day position. So these are things like leadership programs, public servant programs, or any other sort of discipline that you're interested in that you aren't required to take because of your day-to-day job. You'll also have at least one 4 to 6 month developmental assignment, also known as a rotation. This is where you get to take a different position, potentially in a different area of the country, and try it out for 4 to 6 months. So it's a required learning experience that's unique to the program. You'll also be assigned a senior level mentor, so usually another PMF in your agency who's already gone through the program. You'll have all of the benefits of a normal federal employee. That includes health insurance, dental, vision, life, long-term care, flexible spending, paid holidays, leave, flexible work hours, and the thrift savings plan. There is also potential for other benefits that you can negotiate with whatever agency you get hired with. So that can be things like public transportation subsidies, telework, student loan repayment, the list goes on. Different agencies will offer different benefits. But of course, the big one is the opportunity to non-competitively convert to a term or permanent federal position at the end. So if you complete all of the PMF program requirements, then you have the option to non-competitively convert, which means you don't have to go through the application process on USA Jobs. So this can either be staying in your current position or converting into a totally new position that might interest you elsewhere in the federal government or within your agency. You're not competing with anybody else. It is just a bone at the end of the program that you get because you successfully completed all of the fellowship requirements. So here's the tentative application timeline. These are subject to change, but in my experience, they usually don't. These dates are usually pretty set in stone. So in August and throughout the month of September, before the application actually opens, OPM holds a series of informal webinars that will give you more information on the program. So they'll be really similar to what you're getting now in terms of information, but there will be actual representatives from OPM to discuss the program requirements and maybe answer some more questions in detail about the program specifics. On September 13th this year, the PMF Class of 23 application is slated to open at noon Eastern, and we'll talk about how to apply for that in the next couple slides. 3 to 4 weeks after the application closes on September 27th, you'll get the first round of semifinalists that are selected and notified. Those semifinalists then move on to the fellow structured interview phase of the application process, and that'll be conducted over 6 to 8 weeks. By mid-February of 23, the class of finalists will announce, and those finalists will be able to apply for PMF jobs across the country. So we'll start out with who is eligible to apply in the first place. So this program is geared towards current and recent graduates with advanced degrees. This could be a master's, some sort of professional program like a law degree, or a doctorate program from accredited institutions worldwide, K-State included. You have options on when you can apply for the program. You can actually apply more than once. So you can apply within your last year of study or up to 2 years after completing your advanced degree. So an example for the class of 23, if your degree requirements are completed by August 31st, 23, then you're a current graduate, you can apply within your graduation year. Recent grads, of course, mean that your advanced degree will be completed between September 13th, 2020 or September 13th, 2022. So I actually applied twice for the program, and the assessment and application process were super similar between the 2 years. So sometimes it takes more than one attempt. That's completely normal, and I know a lot of other folks who have had to do it multiple times as well. The big requirement is that you either need to be a US citizen or have the ability to legally work within the United States. So the application process, like I said, it will open Tuesday, September 13th, and will be open for about 2 weeks until Tuesday, September 27th. The announcement will originally be posted on USA Jobs. It was the same for my class year as well, but you'll click a link on that USA Jobs website, and it will direct you to the Talent Management System, or TMS. And this is a dedicated PMF website where you go through the application process, and if you're selected as a finalist, you'll also apply for PMF jobs in the same place. So there are a few different components of your online application. Everything is done online, but you've got to pay really specific attention to all of the different pieces. Number one is your resume. It can really be in any format. Usually when you're applying for federal jobs via USA Jobs, it has to be in a specific federal format. Not quite so for the PMF. You can format it any way you want, but in my experience, that federal resume tends to be a little bit more successful because it really outlines in detail your past experience, where your talents lie. It just gives you a little bit of a leg up over other applicants. Your transcript is another really important piece. It's meant to provide proof that you've either earned your graduate degree or you're going to earn your advanced degree within the appointment eligibility timeframe. There are a couple important pieces of information that need to be on that transcript, and we'll discuss those in a little while. You'll also have supporting documentation for things like veterans preference or any other reasonable accommodations for the assessment process. And then, of course, there's the online assessment, and that's all you need for round one of the application. Having these documents put together in advance really helps with the application process. A lot of your energy is going to be focused on that assessment portion. You don't want to have to scramble with paperwork while you're trying to take the assessment at the same time. So I definitely recommend having that prepared in advance. Semifinalists are then selected approximately 3 to 4 weeks after the application closes. And then semifinalists go through the structured interview portion. And then finalists are announced. Finalists will have 12 months of appointment eligibility, meaning you have 12 months to find a PMF job on that talent management site. Upon securing that position, then you're officially a fellow. And just some stats for you in that bottom right-hand corner. This is the average applicants per year and the average selected finalists. So about 6,000 per year over the past 5 years. 566 of those on average have been selected as finalists, but it spans a wide degree of academic disciplines. And of course, a wide degree of academic institutions as well. Veterans, I have noticed, do have a little bit of a preference. 11.5% of finalists have been veterans. So if you are a veteran, it's important to have that documentation in order. It might win you a little bit of favor when finalists are selected. Transcript requirements. So this is where most people make mistakes. It's really important to have all of this information on your transcript, or it could disqualify you from your application. The transcript has to have your name, the college and university name and or official logo, your advanced degree program, and your degree completion date or anticipated degree completion date. So because I applied after I had graduated from Kansas State, ordering that transcript online, it had all of the information I needed. But the first year when I applied, I was still a graduate student, and that transcript did not have the anticipated degree completion date on it. So I wound up having to get a letter from the registrar's office. So just for those of you who are still current students, that'll be an important piece. The transcript can be unofficial, but a lot of the time it won't contain all of that information. So just very important to make sure all of that is on your transcript, and if it's not, talk to the registrar's office. Get a formal letter written up, and you can submit that with your supporting documentation. That should fulfill the requirements. Of course, they've got to be in English and legible for consideration. Transcripts are usually printed, so that shouldn't be a huge concern. So we'll touch upon the assessment process. This is pretty different this year from when I applied. They've added a couple new pieces, including that structured interview, and they've mixed up the portions of the assessment that you actually have to take. But it's designed to measure certain competencies. The way that OPM scores these is sort of unknown, even to us ambassadors, but we do know that these are some critical elements that they're looking for. So you've got things like attention to detail, interpersonal skills, self-management, all of the tools that might help you be successful as a federal employee. And the assessment is not like the SAT or any sort of other academic exam that you may have taken in the past. It's quite different. They're not measuring math skills. They're not measuring any sort of vocab skills. They're looking at your personality and the way that you would respond in certain situations. So it's pretty unique in that regard. It's broken up into 3 parts. So number 1 is the Fellows Behavioral Assessment Tool, or FBAT. The second piece is the Fellows Situational Assessment Tool, or FSAT. These are the first 2 pieces that you'll take online. If you're selected as a semifinalist, then you move on to the third piece, the Fellows Structured Interview. And then we will talk a little bit about the first 2 pieces before we touch on that structured interview. So like I said, the first 2, the FBAT and the FSAT, are all online. They're all on that talent management website that I mentioned earlier. The FBAT is looking specifically at behaviors related to critical competencies for PMF roles. So things like leadership skills, everything we discussed on that previous slide. The FSAT is going to ask something a little bit different. They're going to ask you to evaluate various courses of action in response to PMF work-related situations. So both of these sections in the past have been multiple choice. I'm assuming they're going to be the same this year based on what OPM has told us about it. It will basically give you 4 or 5 different answers and ask you to evaluate different courses of action that you are most likely to take or least likely to take. So really, it's structured like a personality test. You don't have to do any sort of studying. You've just got to answer honestly, answer in the way that you would be most likely or least likely to react. The other key piece is that each part of the online assessment is timed. So you'll have a specific amount of time to complete both sections. Shouldn't be any more than 2 hours for each section. There are sample questions that you can find in the PMF applicant handbook on that PMF website. But important to note, no special training or experience is required. They're just asking for you to answer honestly, answer in the way that you would be most likely to. And you're also welcome to complete these 2 sections at different times. You don't necessarily have to sit down at a computer and do it all at once. But once you start a section, you've got to finish it in that one go. So once the timer starts ticking down, you can't get up and come back to it later. So now we'll talk about the interview, and this is the piece that's new for this year. So they define it for us. A structured interview is an assessment method designed to measure job-related competencies of candidates by systematically inquiring about their behavior and past experiences or their proposed behavior in hypothetical situations. So it's actually really similar to the written portion of the exam. So everything you take online, they're basically going to check it with this interview process as well. So that's why you really want to answer honestly with that exam. I'm sure if they find that your answers are differing between both the exam and the structured interview, it's going to raise some red flags. So while you're taking that exam, really important to answer how you would. Try not to just pick the best answer that you think that they're looking for. So applicants who are actually invited to the semifinalist stage will get an invitation via email. It'll be a live interview with a panel, approximately 30 minutes long. It'll be audio only, so no video required. But you'll be asked to respond to a series of questions. It'll be very similar to a normal federal job interview, just structured specifically for PMFs. They're looking for those core competencies, just like we talked about earlier. So there's additional info on the PMF website. There's a PMF resources page. I definitely suggest you check that out because they've got more Q&A on that interview portion on their website. So criteria. All applicants who apply, even if it's 6,000 different people, are chosen based on the same 5 basic criteria. Number 1 is the ability to meet eligibility requirements. Number 2 are the complete applications. So that's where you want to make sure your paperwork is in order early, your transcript has everything on it that needs to be, and that you fill out all of the information that they ask of you completely. 3 is the online assessment results. That's where things get a little bit tricky. If you're not selected as a finalist, or even if you are, you'll never know how that online assessment is scored. We sort of know what they're looking for, but they're never going to give you any sort of feedback, even if you're not selected. So it's sort of a shot in the dark. At least it was for me between year 1 and year 2. I applied 2 separate times, but was only selected for one of them. And the only thing I changed between both years was my transcript. I had beefed it up a little bit, but the online assessment, because they were looking at those personality aspects, was probably really similar. So I'm not really sure what got me through that second year, but just important to answer honestly, try your best. Don't just pick the things that you think they might be looking for. 4 is the structured interview results. So I'm sure this is going to be a pretty big piece. I'm imagining that around half the class, maybe a little bit less, will be selected as semifinalists. So all of those applicants will go through the exact same interview with the exact same questions. And I'm sure they just want to get a sense of your personality, make sure that your online assessment answers were honest. Lastly, the total number of finalists authorized for each year. This was a piece I didn't really know about when I was applying. Agencies will submit PMF positions into OPM before the application process even opens up to the public. So we sort of have an idea of what jobs are going to be announced for that upcoming year. We know what different agencies are looking for. So the total number of finalists might differ from year to year. A good example is my class. So during my class of 2021, about 500 finalists were selected. But last year's class of 2022, we had over 1,000 finalists that were selected from the program just because the demand for PMFs was so high. So it'll differ from year to year, but it does play a part. And then after the structured interviews conclude, finalists will be announced, and they're still anticipating by mid-February 2023. And just a note that I threw in that's really important to mention, nowhere in the selection criteria did it mention GPA. That is not the only thing that they're looking for. That's probably not what's going to set you apart from other candidates. Advanced degree candidates are applying from all over the country. Some have better GPAs than others, but really what they're looking for are all of those criteria that we discussed before. Leadership skills, a passion to serve, the ability to help manage other people. So GPA probably does play a role, but not the only one. You don't need a 4.0 to be a PMF. So this is where things get fun. If the applicant is selected as a finalist, all of the opportunities sort of unfold in front of you. So you get access to that PMF talent management system, the TMS, and that's where all of the jobs are going to be posted. And they are PMF specific. You are not competing with the general public. You are only competing with other PMFs for all of the positions that are listed. All of the agencies that take part in the program will post to the same place. So you don't even have to go into this process with a federal agency in mind. If you're selected as a finalist, you have the opportunity to apply for any of them that you are eligible for. So of course, there are different job series. You have to actually meet the eligibility requirements to be hired for a specific job. For example, some of them require specific degrees. Accounting jobs will require accounting degrees, so on and so forth. You can opt in to be electronically notified of post-appointment opportunities at this point too. And some of my best advice, if you're selected as a finalist, is definitely to do that. It gets pretty competitive, especially at first. All of that class of PMFs that are selected, so let's say it's 500, like my class, will be applying for the jobs that come up first, more than likely. The positions change throughout the year. Agencies might post a chunk of 25 at the beginning, maybe a chunk of 25 jobs later that year, but a lot of people are gunning for those first positions. I know I was. So it was nice to be notified so I could apply really early. The PMF program office also sponsors an annual hiring event and meet and greets with the agencies. So the hiring event is like a virtual hiring fair. They used to be in person, but just so everybody has the opportunity to attend, now it's hosted online via Zoom. So different agencies will introduce themselves, talk about their missions, talk about what they do and what they're looking for in PMFs. Individual agencies will also host those meet and greets. I know the Forest Service does for us, and it gives applicants and finalists an opportunity to ask about that specific agency and ask about certain jobs and policies. Also important to note that finalists have an eligibility of 12 months from the date they're selected as finalists to secure a PMF appointment. So that's why it's so important to look on that job board super early and apply for anything that might interest you. A lot of people go into it with a specific agency or location in mind. My best advice, if you're selected as a finalist, is not to do that. Keep your mind open to different agencies, keep your mind open to different positions, and especially different areas and locales. You're not always going to wind up exactly where you want to be in the country, but keep in mind the program is only 2 years long. I've called it my golden ticket. Once you complete the program, that non-competitive conversion at the end grants you the opportunity to go anywhere you'd like in the country, work for any agency you could possibly imagine, and also find any position that interests you. So you definitely have options to move around. Don't let the location of a job turn you off from applying for it. The policies and incentives after hiring are determined by the individual agencies. So what the Forest Service does for our PMFs might be different from what the State Department does for theirs or what the CDC does for theirs. You do have eligibility extension opportunities. So let's say a finalist has already accepted a PMF appointment or applied to a position, but they can't onboard by the deadline because of graduation requirements or logistical issues with moving. An agency might request an extension to extend their eligibility beyond that 12 months. So the option is there in special circumstances. It's not set in stone. So if you actually find that PMF position, then you're appointed. You become a fellow. You're no longer just a finalist. And like I said, these are 2-year full-time positions at the federal agency of your choice, full salary and benefits. Usually the path starts at a GS-9 if you're straight out of grad school and haven't had federal employment in the past that might designate you for higher GS level. These salaries are public knowledge. If you're interested in a certain location, like let's say you're interested in the DC area, you can actually look them up online and see exactly what you're going to be paid. The promotion potential does go up to the GS-13, so you're eligible for promotions during your fellowship, just like any other government employee. Usually the career path is at that GS-9 level to start with, but at your 1-year anniversary, you are automatically promoted to the GS-11. So as long as you're meeting all of your eligibility requirements and you have a successful performance review with your supervisor, you're automatically promoted. That's exactly what happened to me. At the end, you can non-competitively convert to a term or permanent position. And just to define term for those of you who haven't heard of that before, a term position is usually a temporary position. It can be up to 4 years with the federal government. Sometimes they are created for specific people. So the PMF program sometimes is a good example of that. Maybe a fellow has been working in a non-permanent position. It was created as a PMF position to fulfill some temporary project or temporary need that an agency might have. You can be extended for up to 4 years if you accept a term position. If you accept a permanent position, then you just have a permanent position. You're with the government for as long as you'd like to be. Upon program completion, if you start at the GS-9, you'll be eligible for the GS-12. All it takes is 1 year at the GS-11 level to be eligible for a 12, and you'll get that automatically since the fellowship is 2 years long. So that length of time winds up working out perfectly to be promoted to that GS-12 at the end. And the salaries are pretty competitive. They're not quite as high as the private sector, but all of the benefits that we get as federal employees definitely makes up for that. So the most common mistakes during the application period, like I said, the transcript issues are number one. They are the cause for a lot of applicants getting their application completely disqualified. You want to make sure all of those components that we discussed are on that transcript. If you're ordering one after graduating, you should be in the right boat. If you are a current graduate student applying for this program, you want to work with the registrar's office and make sure you have what you need. Insufficient documentation isn't good either. You can go into the USA Jobs listing and see exactly what you'll need. So you want to make sure your resume is complete, make sure you have that transcript, make sure you have any sort of veteran status documentation that you might need, or any sort of special request documentation that you might need as well. The other most common mistake is waiting until the last minute to apply. You want to take your time on the assessments. You want to take time making sure your paperwork is all in order. If you wait until the last day, it just won't leave you sufficient time to go over all of that and really be proud of what you're submitting to OPM. Most applicants will submit within the first week. If you're interested in the program, I definitely suggest you do the same. You'll have time to go back into the talent management system, look over all of your documentation, and triple check that everything is there before you submit. So now we'll talk about my experience a little bit and what the program has done for me. So I originally applied to the program because I'd wanted to be a public servant since I was around 8 years old. So it's always been the path for me. I tailored my entire academic career with getting that public service experience, trying to make sure that I had a competitive resume to be hired on as some sort of ecologist for the federal government. So the PMC program helped a lot with that. They exposed me to a lot of different projects within national parks. I got to travel all over the country to complete a whole bunch of really cool different projects. And in the end, I think it definitely set me ahead of other applicants when applying for the program. The agency I wound up with was actually not my original choice. I was hoping to go into the program looking at the Fish and Wildlife Service. I had learned about the program from just a professional conference. I had met a chief for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service who was at one of my presentations. She really liked my talk, and she invited to fly me out to DC for a week to shadow her with the Fish and Wildlife Service, see what her job entails. And she brought up the PMF program at that conference. So I took her up on the offer, flew out to DC. We wound up talking about the program a whole bunch, and I went ahead and applied that year and was not selected. So I was a little put down by the experience, but applied again that following year when I actually graduated, and I wound up being selected. She told me that if I wound up being selected as a PMF, I could come out to DC and work for her. But life happens. She wound up moving to a different agency within that second year of applying. So she was no longer an option. She was no longer with the Fish and Wildlife Service. I had to come up with a different plan. So just like every other PMF originally starts with, I utilized the talent management system to see what sort of jobs were available. And the Forest Service had been a second choice pick for me. And boy, am I glad I kept an open mind, because this agency has been absolutely life-changing for me. So the pictures that you see in front of you, the one on the right is my office 3 days a week. So this is Mount Graham in Arizona. It's a 10,700 foot mountain smack dab in the middle of my forest. And my job as a recreation staff officer is to manage all of the campgrounds, over 330 miles of trail, and 2 big wilderness areas. So I get to come out in the field as often as I want, as I need to do my job. It's exposed me to a lot of really wonderful places. Most PMFs will immediately go to DC or try to secure a position in a supervisor's office. But I recommend that if you can get field experience with the job that you're interested in, try and shoot for that. It's introduced me to a lot of really wonderful people. The picture on the left is just another cool opportunity that the PMF program has put in front of me. So this is my recent rotational experience, or my detail assignment, as it's known in the Forest Service. So I traveled from Arizona to North Carolina. I spent 4 months on the Pisgah National Forest, which is especially busy, much different than Arizona. That district saw 6 million visitors a year, and this is a wonderful group of them. This is a delegation from the country of Georgia. So as a PMF, I got to interact with an international delegation, host them on the district for a day, and show them around the forest that I was detailed on. So just a lot of really cool experiences. And you've heard me call the PMF program a golden ticket. The reason I say that is because that detail experience was a direct result of meeting another PMF just by happenstance. He offered me the detail on the spot, and it happened to be the place where I wanted to relocate to for my non-competitive conversion. So things really come together. The program is very tight-knit, especially in the Forest Service. We're actually one of the biggest recruiters of PMFs every year. So if you wind up being selected as a finalist, you'll see a lot of positions with us. And they're not just land management positions. We offer them in every discipline that you can think of. No matter what degree you have, you're likely to find something within this agency. But there are a lot of other really wonderful agencies too. You can really tailor the program to your interests. It's a great thing. And then, like I mentioned before, the program builds upon skills that you might already have from graduate school, college, or even further back than that. I flew drones while I was at Kansas State. I now fly drones for the government. So I'll fly them on natural resource missions, just like I did at Kansas State, but I'm also trained to fly on wildfires. So it gets me out from behind the desk, gets me out in the field, and I get to help a whole bunch of other program areas that might not even be necessarily related to recreation. So different than my day job, but the program just intends to build on what you're already interested in and really hone into those leadership skills so you can continue using them. I've been exposed to a whole bunch of different people. You interact with a lot of other different PMFs, people in your agency. You wind up doing a lot of traveling for that 80 hours of required training each year. The program is just a really phenomenal opportunity if you've always been interested in public service and you want something adventurous and different that might take you to areas that you never quite expected. So a couple good resources if you are interested in the program. They can be found on that pmf.gov website. There's a PMF section called Become a PMF, and there's a resources page under there with all kinds of goodies, including the handbook, a Q&A, a whole bunch of different documentation that might be useful for studying for the assessment process, including example questions. So that is a great place to visit. And then there's the Become a PMF section of that website as a whole, not just the resources page. There's a whole bunch of other information, including those dates that I went over earlier. Just a great place to check out. And like I said, do your best to prepare in advance. Really good to get that transcript in order, all of your documentation in order well in advance. And then if you do need that letter from the registrar's office, of course, advance notice is always appreciated for them. So go and check that out early. So I'm happy to take any sort of questions about the program, about my experience. My contact information is up there too if you've got an especially long one that you want me to take a look at. I'm on that email every day, so fire away, send them my way.
Well, thanks so much, Kristen. And yes, if anyone has questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. And if people are thinking, one comment and one question for you, Kristen. Just a comment on great to hear the example you shared that illustrates the value of networking and sharing how you learned about the PMF from attending a conference. And yeah, I think just a great way to illustrate that value for grad students to attend conferences or meetings or really just anywhere when you have the opportunity to connect with other people. You never know what types of opportunities are going to come from that. And then just a follow-up question. You mentioned specifically with the assessment that you never get any feedback on that. So you don't receive any feedback whatsoever if you're not selected, correct?
None whatsoever. It'll just be a yes, you've been selected, congratulations email, or a no, I'm sorry, you have not been selected. So between that first and second year, it was especially frustrating for me. I didn't know what caused me to not get selected the first year and what I did right that second year that did. But like I said, it's not just about your application. It's about agencies' needs. It's about the projected hiring status for agencies. There is a lot that goes on in the background and it might not be related to you at all.
And we've got a question from Liz. Do you know if veterans or military can apply while they're still on active duty?
I believe they can. They just need to meet those timeline requirements that OPM sets for the PMF program. So either currently enrolled, graduating within the year, or 2 years out from a previous graduation, but no further than that 2 years.
And a question from Jim. Is there a strong network among PMF recipients now that you're in a government career?
Very much so. It's always really exciting to go out in the field, maybe host a different agency on federal lands, and realize that one of them in the group is a PMF. There are always good networking opportunities. I can really speak to my agency because the Forest Service PMF network is so strong. We are required to be on different committees to help the incoming class of Forest Service recruited PMFs sort of find their way in the world. We assign mentors. We throw a whole welcome party for them, and Forest Service PMFs wind up talking, throughout their careers. The class of 21 that I'm in, we're very tight knit. We've got check-ins every month. We talk about other PMFs that we've met and how our jobs are going. So yeah, very tight knit with the Forest Service for sure.
And another question for myself, Kristen. So I know when you reached out about reconnecting to provide this presentation, you mentioned during the application process, I think you mentioned you worked with the Career Center at K-State. Can you talk a little bit about what that relationship was like, what kind of support you received from the Career Center, or any other type of guidance or support you received to assist you through the application process?
Sure. So I was the first in my family to go to college, never mind graduate school. So finding my way in the world was a solo endeavor up until I felt like applying for the PMF program, and then I was a little bit lost. Federal resumes are structured differently than normal resumes for private sector jobs. They require you to list every little thing that you've done for at least the past 5 years, from awards to different jobs, even if they have nothing to do with that program area that you're applying for. They need to know every little thing. And that can be a little bit overwhelming when you're used to making 1 or 2 page resumes. I needed help structuring things. I needed some guidance on how to word all of that. It was just a huge undertaking for someone who had never done it before. So I went to the Career Center the first year I applied, as soon as I got back from that professional conference. I was still a year out from graduation, but I wanted to prepare well in advance, get that resume up to snuff and get it ready. And the Career Center helped me a lot. They helped me with formatting and phrasing. They helped me decide what to bullet out and explain a little bit more in depth and what not to. They just helped to get that resume in order. And I know they're very good at their jobs because the resume that they assisted me with was the one that wound up getting me into the program. So a lot of it was research on my part, but they were the ones who gave the final okay, yeah, this should be changed, or yeah, this looks beautiful. Super helpful both years.
Great to hear. Any other questions from attendees?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
I put the other question in the chat, but I'm not sure that I can effectively frame this one in the chat. So I saw you talked through the application requirements, what's required. Is there, but I'm not sure I fully digested it and I can't go back on the slide presentation. Is there a place where you're asked to talk about your future ambitions in this application?
So interestingly, no. There used to be an essay portion of the application back when I applied, and even during, sorry, go ahead.
Went away.
Well, even during my years, it had nothing to do with you. It was a persuasive essay.
Oh, okay.
I always thought that was super interesting that they didn't ask that question because one of the requirements is an interest in public service. So to me, the way that the exam was phrased was really like a personality test. They were looking for that interest in public service in your answers. They never asked it outright, but I know for a fact they were searching for it. And then how you format your resume and the experiences that you have in the past definitely help to persuade them of that too. So if you've done things in local government or you've had federal internships before, anything having to do with public service on your resume will help set you apart and show that.
Okay, thank you. I feel like I have worked with a student on an application for one of these a long time ago, but it's been a while, and I was wondering how you squared the need to be open to working with different agencies with those more personality focused aspects of the application. But it sounds like it's structured so that you don't have to tell them anything that pushes you in one direction or another. Is that what I'm getting?
That's correct. So it wasn't part of the official application process. It wasn't part of the exam. But early on, they asked a question like, what agencies are you interested in? List your top 3. So
Okay.
that might play a role, but it wasn't part of the assessment, so I can't say for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And no guarantees on what they will or will not ask in the interview portion. That was not part of the assessment the year I applied. That's pretty new for this year. So it could come up then, but somehow I doubt. I think they're still going to just present scenarios, see how you'd react.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Well, any closing comments from you, Kristen, or anything else you want to share as we wrap up?
Yeah, I know we've got a class of seniors here. For those of you who are thinking about graduate school, this is open to any discipline. Like I said, you don't have to be a straight A student to get into this program. If you have any interest in public service at all, even if you don't intend with staying with the federal government after grad school, this is an extremely prestigious program and it'll open a lot of doors in the private sector too. Just having this on your resume that you were selected and you were a fellow for 2 years with the federal government, it's huge. Really sets you apart for anything that you might be interested in the future.
Great. Well, thanks so much again, Kristen, for taking time to reconnect with K-State and share your experiences and share some insight for interested students and some of the faculty and staff that joined us today too, to hopefully promote this wonderful opportunity to more K-State students and hopefully increase the alum here that are joining you as a presidential management fellow.
No problem at all. And I hope to see some of you apply. And if you're selected as a finalist this upcoming year, please feel free to reach out. I can help you walk through that finding a job part of the process. And if you're interested in the Forest Service, tell you more about this agency too. So good luck to all of you who choose to apply.